Karen's father is quite wealthy, isn't he? Yes, when he passes, Karen's set to inherit a significant fortune. I reckon it could be around 100 million. Incredible. I can hardly wait. Once that happens, I'm hoping Karen might whisk me away on a luxurious vacation. Sounds delightful. Maybe I'll put in a request for a new car. James, what about you? Well, I've had my eye on a top-of-the-line gaming rig for ages. I wonder if I could subtly suggest it to her. Their conversation bubbled with excitement, oblivious to the solemn expression on my face just outside the door. I clutched my purse tightly. My name is Karen, and I first met my husband James at a bustling social club for professionals. Our shared interests sparked an instant connection, and we've been happily enjoying life together ever since. One day, my routine was disrupted by an unexpected call from my mother. Karen, your father has collapsed. What? My father, known for his jovial spirit and love for dad jokes, was the picture of health. He ran his own company with ease, making the idea of his collapse incomprehensible. Concerned for my father, I immediately left home and caught the next train to the hospital my mother had mentioned. My father was truly a gentle soul. Despite his busy schedule, he always made time for my brother and me, lifting us onto his shoulders and playing with us. I vividly recall his tears of joy as I read a letter to my parents at my wedding to James. The memory was etched in my mind. The thought of such a man falling ill was heart-wrenching. Refusing to accept the news, I hurried to the hospital where my mother sat by my father's side. As soon as I entered, my mother turned to me. Mom, how's Dad? Is he okay? Karen, please let's stay calm and I'll explain. Facing my father lying on the bed, his eyes closed, my mother detailed his condition. He had collapsed suddenly at work, prompting an urgent trip to the hospital. Despite numerous tests, no clear cause for his illness emerged. Further examinations might yield answers, but they also posed risks to his already fragile state. Consequently, my mother had opted to halt the tests. It appears your father may experience paralysis on the left side of his body. So, he'll need ongoing care. Yes, that's correct. Despite the weight of the news, my mother maintained a composed demeanor as she spoke. My mother had already resigned herself to caring for my dad. Contemplating this, I sensed my mother's resilience, yet I was also consumed by sadness at the prospect of my father's changed state. Struggling to contain my emotions, my brother burst into the room. How's Dad? He asked, breathless. My mother repeated the details of my father's condition to him as she had to me. Mom, you can't do this alone. I'm nearby. I'll come help. Thank you, but you need to prioritize your own life. You have your own family now. My brother, understanding, nodded. I understand. My brother had married years before I did and now has a 4-year-old daughter. The one with more flexibility in their schedule is me, the one without children. However, it would still take me an hour by train to reach our childhood home. I might be distant and it could take some time, but I won't leave all of this burden on you and Mom. If there's any change with Dad, don't hesitate to inform me. Agreed, but Karen, did you inform John before coming here? I suddenly realized I'd left home in a hurry without informing John. Seeing my expression, my brother added, be sure to reach out to him. He must be anxious. Leaving the hospital room swiftly, I found a quiet spot to call John. As soon as he answered, he asked, Karen, where are you? I'd been worried sick. Hearing John's voice offered some comfort, yet tears welled up as I explained that my father had collapsed and would require care. Your lively dad. John's shock was palpable, yet his gentle words offered solace. Grateful for marrying him, I informed him on my return home. His gentle response was, I'll prepare dinner. Take care on your way back. With my father set to spend the night in the hospital, and my mother and brother returning home, I opted to head back as well. Arriving home, I found John had prepared my favorite meal. It must have been rough. Have something you love to lift your spirits, he said, pulling out a chair for me. His kindness moved me to tears. While John typically remains composed, his warmth during my lowest moments always touches me deeply. Thanking him for his support, I retired to bed early that evening. The following morning, feeling a bit more composed, I approached John with the idea of assisting in my father's care occasionally. He readily agreed. It turned out that John had already informed his parents about my father's condition, and they offered their assistance with household chores during my absences. I was pleasantly surprised by the full support extended by John's family. When I called to express my gratitude, John's mother chuckled and reassured me. Your father is like family to us. Don't worry about a thing. John's parents, much like him, typically exude composure. Their arrival at our home with smiles and offers of help with chores left me momentarily stunned, a gesture of familial warmth I hadn't experienced before my marriage. Initially, I had perceived my in-laws as somewhat distant, but perhaps I had misunderstood. I made sure to express my heartfelt gratitude to James and my in-laws for their unwavering support in caring for my father. Once a lively conversationalist, my father's ability to speak fluently was hindered by the paralysis on his left side. Yet there was a glimmer of hope in his right-handedness. Using a whiteboard, he conveyed his needs and shared his signature dad jokes through crude drawings and written messages, lifting our spirits despite his near-constant confinement to bed. While my brother offered assistance, it was predominantly my sister-in-law who took on the caregiving role. With her background in caregiving, she patiently and kindly instructed both my mother and me on how best to aid my father. My mother, and I harbored concerns that my sister-in-law might balk at caring for my father, who wasn't related by blood. However, to our relief, she welcomed the responsibility with open arms. Her cheerful declaration, "Your father has brought me so much joy. Now it's my turn to bring him happiness," illuminated her kind nature, reaffirming my belief that my brother had chosen a remarkable partner. While my brother may have found an exceptional spouse, I found solace in knowing that my own spouse was equally supportive. My entire in-law family rallied behind me in my caregiving efforts, always inquiring about my father's well-being whenever I visited to assist him. Their genuine concern never failed to touch my heart. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that perhaps I had misjudged them. One day, as I left home to tend to my father, I realized I had forgotten my wallet upon reaching the station. Frustrated with my own absent-mindedness, I returned home. On days when I went to care for my father, my in-laws would often lend a hand with household chores, so I anticipated they might find my blunder amusing. As I re-entered the house to retrieve my wallet, I overheard a conversation between James and my in-laws in the living room. "Are we certain Karen's father isn't about to kick the bucket? I'm tired of this waiting game." "Huh?" Pausing mid-step, I questioned whether my ears deceived me. Leaning closer to the living room door, I caught their conversation with clarity. "Speaking of which, how much does Karen stand to inherit once her father bites the dust? We've been playing nice, but it only makes sense if we're getting a hefty chunk. Her old man's loaded, you know. What he croaks, she's set to rake in a fortune. I bet it's over 100 mil, right? Geez, that's insane. I'm counting down the days. Once her old man kicks it, I'm hoping she'll whisk me off on a vacation." "That sounds lovely. Maybe I'll put in a request for a car." "James, what about you?" I've been eyeing the top-of-the-line gaming rig for ages. I'm wondering if I can drop a hint for Karen to get me one." Their conversation bubbled with excitement, unaware of the storm raging behind the door. I clutched my wallet tightly, channeling all my emotions into that grip. Anger, frustration, and sadness churned within me, a turbulent whirlpool of thoughts and feelings. Careful not to disturb James and his family in the living room, I slipped out of the house, my mind still reeling. Their sudden kindness felt suspicious, tinged with the scent of greed. My father's inheritance loomed large, a tempting prize for those with less than honorable intentions. But I couldn't bear to entertain the notion that my in-laws were eagerly awaiting his demise. Lost in my turmoil, I found myself sitting on a bench at the local station near my parents' home, the echoes of James and his family's laughter haunting my thoughts. "I won't forgive them. Never," I muttered under my breath, seething with anger. I vowed to exact revenge on James and his conniving family who valued my father, the man who raised me with love, solely for his wealth. Pretending ignorance of their callous conversation, I played along, maintaining my usual polite facade and expressing gratitude for their concern about my father's health. Determined to turn the tables, I resolved to exploit James and my avaricious in-laws for all they were worth. I extended my visits. I dedicated myself to caring for my father while unceremoniously delegating household chores to my in-laws. My money-hungry in-laws readily complied with any requests I made. I noticed the subtle tightening of their faces and James' expression at times, but I paid it no mind. A year passed, and my father's condition deteriorated further. Though the doctor assured me it wasn't urgent, I couldn't shake off a sense of relief. However, when I shared the news of my father's declining health with James and my in-laws, their barely concealed grins betrayed their true intentions. It was the moment they had been waiting for. With resolve, I handed them the divorce papers. Thank you for all your assistance. Please let's part ways. As I made my declaration, James and my in-laws were stunned into silence, but I remained composed as I delivered my prepared speech. So, James, mother-in-law, father-in-law, it's clear you were eyeing my father's inheritance, weren't you? I heard everything. Mother-in-law dreaming of vacations, father-in-law longing for a new car, and James craving that gaming computer. Am I right? I can't stay with people eagerly anticipating my father's demise. The expressions you wore just now were repulsive. It was as if I could see straight through to your crass desires for money upon my father's passing. My words seemed to strike fear into them, their faces frozen in shock. My in-laws remained motionless, while James, clutching the divorce papers, was at a loss for words, his mouth opening and closing in disbelief. It was clear I had no place in this household any longer. You can send the divorce papers by mail, but if you don't, I'll hire a lawyer. Please ensure it's done within a week, I informed James, my voice steady. After collecting the luggage I had prepared earlier, I exited our home. As the train gently rocked me on my journey back to my parents' house, I felt a sense of calm envelop me. Upon my arrival, my parents greeted me warmly. Having confided in my mother about the situation, she enveloped me in a comforting embrace, offering words of encouragement. It was a moment of vulnerability I hadn't experienced since I'd become an adult. The following day, James and my in-laws arrived at my parents' home. Choosing to remain hidden, I observed from afar. When my mother opened the front door, I watched as James and my in-laws knelt before her. We apologize. We want to apologize to Karen. It seems there's been a misunderstanding. Please allow us to apologize to her properly, they pleaded. Misunderstanding. My daughter overheard your conversation. It seems you've been eyeing my husband's inheritance. I don't want any association with people like that, my mother declared, her tone sharp and final. Despite her dismissal, James persisted, pleading to see me. I can't allow it. Karen doesn't want to see you. She doesn't seek apologies. She wants those divorce papers filled out. Have you done it? Hand them over, my mother demanded. Please, just one more chance, James pleaded, desperation creeping into his voice. As James cried out, the sound of a cane tapping echoed from within the house. Turning to look, I saw my father, leaning on his cane with my sister-in-law's support. Father-in-law? James's mouth fell open at the sight of my father, whom he had only heard about. Holding up a whiteboard, my father conveyed a powerful message. I won't surrender my daughter to someone who can't bring her happiness. Grant her wish and proceed with the divorce. The message, penned with resolve, seemed to strike a chord with James and my in-laws more than any other words spoken. It was evident they realized further debate was futile. Slowly, James rose to his feet, followed by my in-laws. I've completed the divorce papers. Here they are, James announced, handing the documents to my mother. He assured her he would inform me once he had filed them with the city hall. With that, my mother bid them farewell. Emerging from my hiding place, I expressed my gratitude. Thank you, Mom and Dad. My mother responded with a gentle smile, while my father let out a hearty laugh and wrote a message on the whiteboard. A father's duty is to protect his daughter until the end. Reading those words on the whiteboard, tears welled up in my eyes. Despite the paralysis on his left side, my father's kindness and love remained unchanged. I had mistakenly believed that he was no longer the father I knew, but it couldn't have been more wrong. He was still the same dependable father who always prioritized my well-being. Dad, I wish for you to live a long, happy life, I whispered, my voice choked with emotion. With tears streaming down my face, I expressed my wish to him, and he responded with a beaming grin. Since then, James has returned to his parents' home, seemingly leading a quiet life with them. As for me, I've adapted to the routine of caring for my father while juggling work commitments. It's a hectic life, but I remember how my father always made time to play with my brother and me when we were young. With that memory in mind, neither my brother nor I feel burdened by caring for him, no matter how busy we become. Despite being partially bedridden and having lost weight, my father's spirit remains unchanged. His infectious laughter and love for dad jokes continue to brighten our days. My sister-in-law often remarks how caring for my playful father brings her joy, allowing us to maintain a peaceful existence.